MultimediaJay radio style.
The wind is absolutely whipping out there today. Things are creaking in the whole 9 yards. We're getting a little bit of catch-up for the winter we haven't been having over the past several days. So, you might hear some background noise. Yesterday, the weather was nice. There were folks whose dogs that were just left out in the yard all day that were all barking at each other. But this time, you might hear some things getting knocked around, creaking, wind blowing through the trees. I don't know how much this microphone really picks up. But through the monitors, I think it might sound like it's more sensitive than it actually is, so we'll see what happens. Regardless, we proceed with one last discussion about Ryzenmania here on MultimediaJay radio style for Sunday, February 26, 2017. Before we get started, I must say that I have no qualms about disabling the comments and ratings on this one if I keep getting people trying to pick me apart on stuff that I've already done my due diligence on. We have to talk about a few more things here, and by the way, the numbers have been garbage as well, so all these people that say that I should never do anything but tech content, tech videos, this is the latest example of why that just isn't a good idea. The tech videos are getting their asses handed to them, which is why I've been trying new stuff lately, like the more cinematic stuff and the mainstream stuff, because most of what I'm getting is trolls. And you know what, folks? Your behavior on here does affect people that upload to this site. I refer to Heel versus Babyface as a great example of this. He got picked apart, as I like to say, because and only because he wanted to continue making gaming videos, but he wanted to stop making videos about World of Warcraft. His audience had none of it. They trolled him in the comments. His numbers went completely to crap. And now they're just digging their grave even more and more over there, complaining about his content nowadays, the ones that are still there anyways, because he's streaming on Twitch and using a sideload feature to sideload stream highlights over to YouTube from Twitch. People are like, are you really not going to do anything more but stream highlights? Wow, your channel sucks now. You should have behaved yourself and actually supported him when all he wanted to do was change games. Folks, this kind of stuff can happen, and it does happen. And I was actually testing my internet connection for streaming support. I would probably have to upgrade to something a little faster to get more upload bandwidth to be able to stream on Twitch. But, you know, if it's more worth it for somebody like a gaming commentator to just stream on Twitch and then bring everything over to YouTube after the fact, that's what people are going to do. So you can't just constantly point fingers at people like Az. You have to look at the why. And this is something I'm running into even outside of this internet stuff with the 9-to-5ers. They want to root cause analysis, find what really happened with everything except human behavior. The minute people are involved, nope, shortcut to the discipline forms. It's terrible. It's man's inhumanity to man, and it affects people. And if you like the content on various YouTube channels, you will do your due diligence to properly support those content creators as well, which is what didn't happen with Az, and now people are screaming and hollering because he actually did something about it instead of continuing to swim against the tide. Now, why am I here today? Why are we here today? Why are we still discussing Ryzenmania? Why is this channel completely out of order now to the point where I uploaded something last night and deleted it this morning to do this first? Ryzen, Windows 7, and people not doing their due diligence with Internet 101. Folks, one of the first things you should never do when someone makes you mad on the internet is hastily Google search for stuff that supports your point without reading the articles. Yesterday's discussion has gained a few more dislikes this morning from a guy and his friends who I cleaned his clock out when he left a comment about, what are you talking about? There's articles about how AMD is going to support Windows 7 with Ryzen and how they're going to not stay on 14 nanometer until 2020. That they're looking at 10 and 7 and things along those. Oh, cool. There's articles. Did you actually click the articles? Did you read the articles? Did you check the dates on the articles? Because there's a little something out there called defamation. And you have a large media establishment. When you have a large media establishment, if they post false information, they run the risk of incurring the drawing the ire of the other party's legal department and being sued. So if you go looking for Ryzen Windows 7, you're going to find a lot of articles where various websites have clarified that, nope, sorry, it looks like there isn't going to be Windows 7 support after all. Our hopes are dashed, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, because there was a little confusion on that earlier, and it appears that PC Mag seems to be the only one that hasn't corrected themselves yet. Maybe there'll be some kind of correction later on. But basically, let's go to that article right now. AMD Ryzen processors will support Windows 7, posted February 6th. The articles about sorry, there isn't going to be Windows 7 support are dated something newer than this, and I think this should get an update at some point. Otherwise, it's going to continue being the one and only wrong article in the Google search results, which I'm sure that the folks at PC Mag don't want. But where do they get this from? Where do they get this thing from when everybody else out there is saying Windows 10 only? Let's see. Windows 7 is still 40% of the desktop operating system market share. Yeah, we'll get to that shortly. The announcement of Windows 7 support for Ryzen processors was made during an information session held by AMD and reported by German-language website Computer Base. Translated German website. Unfortunately, when you click that link and go to the translated article over on Computer Base, the headline is now, let's just click on over to this sucker here. When you go to the translated article from this one, this is one single website in the entire world. It translates over now to AMD also does not provide drivers for Windows 7. The article has been corrected, circa to 1, etc. Let's see here. They will not provide drivers, which is what I was saying yesterday. There's a lack of official support. And if the thing still works, then cool. It may not be optimized, but it's possible maybe that it might still work. But the big problem here is that because we can't know for certain, you lose the corporate market, you lose big business, and you lose a large percentage of customers that are going to run Windows 7 into the ground all the way to 2020. So by continuing to do this, AMD has basically signed themselves up to completely lose a market segment for the duration of the Zen family's lifespan. Another thing that AMD is doing here is that they are, and it's really too bad that these discussions are getting crap views on YouTube because who else is talking about this sort of thing? Another thing, unfortunately, that AMD is doing by doing this is they're acting like Intel. So those of you that think that there's good guy big corporations and bad guy big corporations, well, here you go. AMD has joined Intel in jumping in Microsoft's back pocket with trying to back out of having to officially support Windows 7. Now, this may have a backlash in sales where people keep buying the chips that support Windows 7, but here we go. Arbitrary obsolescence from Microsoft. The looming Armageddon that is Windows 7 going end of support has now been made into something that's going to be an even bigger event. It's worth its own discussion, folks. But when Windows 7 goes end of extended support, it will be an even bigger and nastier event than when Windows XP went end of support. The headline version of this is Windows 7 was built from the ground up. Windows 7 was built from the ground up to be more secure than XP, which was patched into more modern levels of security with a service pack. It also has support for 64-bit computing, which means higher RAM limits and things like that. You'll find Windows 7 on all those refurbs that make computing nice and cheap for people that want an inexpensive entry-level computer solution for their home or office. So Windows XP was one heck of a thing when it went end of life. It's going to be even bigger for Windows 7. But to play devil's advocate in all of this, Windows 7 is a product of the last decade. I know it's been running so well that it's practically transparent to us exactly how old Windows 7 is. But Windows 7 came out at the end of the last decade. And the design is basically a cleaned up version of Windows Vista, which came out in the middle of the last decade. Unfortunately, despite Windows 7 still just plain working, Windows 7 has more ties to the 2000s than the 2010s. Now, I'm not a fan of arbitrary obsolescence, so I do not agree with Microsoft just arbitrarily slamming the door on a product that works again after they already did that with Windows XP. But I do like some of the newer features in Windows 10, like the cloud-based installs, not having to chase down product keys or anything along those lines. and stuff like that. So I actually do like using Windows 10. I also like that you can use the unregistered one with some watermarks and not have the kinds of restrictions that previous unregistered copies of Windows would run. So for testing purposes, you can actually do something like that and then have licenses on all the systems that you use. And that's what I have going on right now. I have a license on Monolith that can be transferred off because it's retail. I have Tuxedo, and then the others are just older systems that I usually play with Linux on anyway. So, test, install, then take it off, put Linux back on, something like that. Works out quite well, actually. However, if you go to buy a refurb out there, you're going to have to really dig to find one that runs Windows 10 that you can run into the ground and not have to worry about the OS. The odds are you're going to end up with a Windows 7 machine, which only has a few more years on it before that goes end of service. But hey, maybe it could cost less to buy a license when it's, considered an upgrade when it goes EOS or EOES, something like that. But I'm not a fan of arbitrary tricks. I'm not a fan of what's coming up with Windows 7, but unfortunately, it is going to be an event, and it's going to be an event very, very similar to the Windows XP retirement. Corporate America will probably abandon it in droves because corporate America and corporate IT likes sure things. It'll be us home users that just, my computer still works, I'm going to keep XP on it. There's going to be a bunch of Windows 7 people in a couple of years that are going to be in the exact same boat. And because Windows 7 has more support for things like 64-bit computing and stuff like that, I expect Windows 7's slice of the pie to decrease slower than Windows XP did after going end of support. Now, in the case of Ryzen and in the case of Kaby Lake, it's pretty simple. I mean, the demographics involved with Windows 7 are basically going to be old computers in the very near future, or people that are running an old copy into the ground as much as humanly possible. So why do you want to have that hold back processor design and things along those lines? And this might be something else, too, in terms of human behavior, because people aren't going to be that boo-hoo-hoo about not being able to use Windows 7 on newer processors. They'll just keep buying Skylake until that's gone, or the other stuff until it's gone. So it's not the end of the world, and I'm guessing people that don't want the latest and greatest aren't going to go too crazy about what kind of system they have anyways, as long as it does what they need it to do, which is going to be the reason why people are slow to get rid of Windows 7 in the first place. But notice here, you had one single article on the entire internet that has now been corrected, but unfortunately, the article that linked to it has not been corrected, and that is basically the entire meat of the argument about Ryzen supporting Windows 7, when all kinds of other sites have updates about, nope, our hopes are dashed, update, Ryzen won't support Windows 7 after all. Right down the screen. It takes some serious cherry picking to leave a comment like the one that I responded to this morning. Now, lastly, as the final step of this clock cleaning spree to shut all of this down that I woke up to this morning, let's talk about lithography and 14 nanometer for 4 years, which the business analysts over on Seeking Alpha were talking about yesterday. Now, here's the thing. I don't care what the lithography is. If it's an efficient chip, I'll actually pick up a processor for its efficiency rather than its die size. This is more of a supply side thing for the manufacturer in terms of the manufacturing costs, which is something that AMD and Intel will be grappling with. But here's the thing. If you go looking for 10 nanometer, it's running, of course, into technical issues and things like that. And it's not just Intel that's running into it. There's the manufacturers in general, like Global Foundries and the folks who actually do stuff with the wafers are actually running into trouble with this. Some have some designs, some don't. There's a chance that that 10 nanometer could be skipped in favor of 7, and there could be some leapfrog going on. But that's all speculation. And if you go looking for AMD and 10 nanometer, you're going to get all speculation, dead giveaways in the language that it's speculation. Like AMD has plans. No, that's something else. AMD and NVIDIA GPUs likely to skip 10 nanometer in favor of 7 nanometer in 2018. Likely, opinion, a guess, speculation, useless. AMD could skip 10 nanometer node for 7nm in upcoming chips. Could, speculation, we don't know, useless. But let's talk about what we do know. And it's from Lisa Su's own presentations. If the company doesn't do this, then they're backing off on something they promised those customers that they desperately need to get back into contention with Intel. AMD has had it with the sockets are us that they've had going on. AM3, AM3 Plus, FM2, blah, 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 blah. How many different sockets has AMD tossed around in the last couple of years? Enough is enough is enough is enough is enough. What we've heard, and what we can actually say that we actually know, because it's actually a thing, is that AMD wants Ryzen to be everywhere, from the server to the itty-bitty mobile device. They want to see where they can get Ryzen to actually sell, and socket AM4 all up and down for the motherboard setups. No more of this AM3 Plus, AM3, FM2, da-da-da-da-da-da. So, the plan for our sake as consumers is stability over the next couple of years. So if there's another Ryzen chip that comes out later in the Ryzen family's life cycle that suits our fancy, we can finally, hey, do a processor upgrade. You know how many times I've referred to the motherboard, processor, and RAM as guts, and I call them guts upgrades, because they tend to all happen at the same time, because that's where you're going to run into your compatibility issues. I mean, when I was first hearing about building my own computer all those years ago, people were talking to me about, oh, you just upgrade stuff. You don't have to buy whole new systems. But then we get to the point where you have to get the motherboard and processor roughly around the same time and probably change RAM at the same time. It's about 2/3 of the way to building a new system. The only upgrades that I mean, the case can cost money if you have a decent case, but there's also sub $50 cases out there and stuff like that. The case can cost money. The drives, no, those can actually go from system to system, except in the case of EIDE to serial ATA. So it hasn't really panned out as much as the folks are like, yeah, you should get into building your own computers, were telling me in terms of upgrades, because there have been times I've felt like I've been building a whole new system because I had to buy a new motherboard and had to buy a new processor to go with it. The only time I've actually done a straight up processor or motherboard switch out is when something broke. Tuxedo, the motherboard died. But the Phenom 2 that's in the new motherboard is the original one from 2010, and the RAM is the stuff I was using before the old board died. So it's only been a repair thing. It hasn't been a situation where I want some more horsepower, so I regularly get to upgrade just the processor, just the motherboard. The RAM is something else, because RAM can span quite a few years of stuff, but sockets have been a lot more fickle for processors. And so for AMD to be addressing this with AM4 all the way through Ryzen's life cycle, if they don't fold on this, this is going to be a net plus for consumers, because you'll be able to upgrade your horsepower. Well, assuming you want a faster Ryzen chip down the road, then you'll probably be able to use AM4 for that too, if the motherboard manufacturer doesn't arbitrarily step in with some artificial lack of support, even after BIOS updates. But the bottom line is that AMD wants things to be nice and stable and predictable and reliable with the Ryzen. So what I can know for certain is 14 nanometer and socket AM4 for the duration of the Ryzen family's life cycle. That may come back to bite them in a couple of years if say these chip manufacturers can turn things around. But at this point, I just want a decent system. And if that means 14 nanometer, cool. 10, 7, we'll see. But I don't really focus on the lithography. I don't know if I've ever focused on the lithography. That's very much a business side thing in terms of manufacturing and how much it costs to make each chip, which affects how competitive the pricing can be for them. So it's not really something, I may indirectly be concerned about it, but it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to look for. Speaking of not going out of my way, I'm not going to go out of my way to continue being sidelined by people trying to pick me apart while not doing their due diligence on their end with this sort of thing. So let's end this right here, right now, and say that maybe I should blow off the comments for a couple of days if this is the kind of activity and feedback that I'm going to get. The black hole of YouTube continues to be a perennial source of disappointment, and this is but the latest example. This is MultimediaJay signing off. Mic drop.